having trouble. There we go.
There it is. There it is.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We are waiting for one more for quorum who is on their way. So we are going to start the meeting with some items that do not need a vote. But before we move forward, I would like to acknowledge today is National Indigenous Day. And for that, I brought along the acknowledgement, the land acknowledgement, and Elizabeth has that. So with your indulgence. Thank you. Pass it to Elizabeth.
We acknowledge that the land on which we meet is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Atitlan-Darroch, Anishinaabe, and Mississauga peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Munsee Delaware Nation, Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, and Oneida Nation of the Thames. This land was settled through Treaty 2, the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790. And we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, recognize our collective responsibilities to the land and water.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Like that.
Thanks. Thanks. The chair, just remind members that board members, staff, guests, and members of the public are reminded that the full authority board committee meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the authority's website along with official written minutes. As such, comments and opinions expressed and published, and any comments expressed by individual board members and guests. Sorry, I'm just gonna move this up so I can see what I'm talking. So as such, comments and opinions expressed may be published, and any comments expressed by individual board members, guests, and the general public are their own and do not represent the opinions or comments of the full authority and or the KCA Board of Directors. The recorded video of the full authority meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the full authority meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by the full authority. As the chair mentioned, we currently are meeting for one member for quorum, but was the will of the board to proceed with members that don't require action or just information information items at this time. So with that, we'll wait for the approval of the minutes until we have quorum. And Marianne, if you are available, if you still wanted to do your media report.
So we kicked off the kind of summer season with our first festival at Dan Patterson Conservation Area this weekend. The Kettle Creek Environmental Trust hosted the Kettle Creek Food Truck Festival, and I just kind of wanted to highlight some of the activities that occurred that day. We had live music, games on the green, face painting, and a lot of hands-on engaging activities for families and anyone that attended. We had 8 food trucks that were there all day, and just wanted to also thank our board member John for offering his musical talents and playing a set for us. It was a great day, and we still are the trust is still tallying final numbers, but they're looking at a $10,000 fundraising day. So it was an achievement for the trust as well. So just wanted to highlight that.
In terms of project tracking, Chair, and other items that the staff have been busy with, we did proceed with the new server installation, and it was completed on June 16th. Staff have also met with Elgin County EMS to discuss updates to the county's emergency response plan and provided information on the roles and responsibilities of CAs during flood events. Betsy hosted a Kettle Creek Environmental Youth Corps event on June 3rd, and we're continuing some environmental works around Lake Margaret. 1,000 wildflower plugs were planted during that event. She's also gearing up for the Carolinian Forest Festival, and it's at capacity already, 2,000, with over 5,500 students interested in that event. So it just speaks to the popularity of that event still. All trees planted, all our 50,000 trees were planted by May 31st. So another great season for the tree planting team. And this is the first year since the pandemic where a full schedule of visitor service events is. So the campgrounds are pretty excited about that. And our Tall Tales Fishing Derby will occur on July 8th. The Elgin Kettle Creek Agricultural Scholarship, we're accepting nominations for that. So anyone who knows a post-secondary student living in the watershed or within Elgin County is pursuing environmental education with a slant on agriculture are encouraged to apply for that scholarship, and the information is online.
Any comments from the?
Is there
Councilor Herbert.
an update on the fire ban?
It has been lifted.
Has been lifted.
Yeah, there was a full fire ban at the Dalewood campground, partial one at Lake Whitaker, but I think it was last week, both of them, or this,
Lifted on the 15th.
the 15th, they were both lifted. So
Thank you.
that was the case.
Councilor Herbert, you had a question?
Oh,
Thank you. I do have a question on the July 8th Tall Tales Fishing Derby.
Okay,
There is no time that's on that, so could we get what the time is going to be for that?
Marianne, can you clarify, but I believe it begins at 7 in the morning.
Yeah, it's from 7 till noon, and registration, that if you want to register ahead, it'll open at the Lake Whitaker Gatehouse on June 26th. But anyone that wants to attend can also register day of.
Thank you very much.
And Betsy, did you want to talk to this next slide?
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to give the board members an update. This was one of the projects that you approved at our April meeting of funding through the Kettle Creek Clean Water Initiative. So this was one of the wetland sites that you can see here. And so the picture on the right is just that wetland immediately after construction. This was in the height of the dry period. So you can see there's a little bit of groundwater input into that wetland already, but we will wait for the rains to come to fill that wetland over time, just so you can see what it looks like right after excavation.
Thank you. Questions from the members? Thank you very much for that.
So Chair, now might be a good time just to do a roll call now that I do have quorum, and then we can move forward.
Thank you very much.
No, you saved the day. Lori Baldwin Sands,
Here,
Jim Herbert,
yes. I'm just trying to think. I said it.
Sharon McMillan.
Yes.
Todd Noble,
Yes.
Sam Trousseau,
Here,
John
Yes.
Wilson. And Chair, we do have quorum at this time.
thank you very much. So moving forward with the meeting, is there any declarations of pecuniary interest with any of the items on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move forward to the minutes of the meeting. You have a recommendation?
That the minutes of the May 17th, 2023 meeting be approved.
Moved.
By Jim, seconded by Todd. Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none,
Jim Herbert,
Yes.
Sharon McMillan,
Yes.
Todd Noble,
Yes.
Sam Trousseau,
yes,
John Wilson,
Yes.
Lori Baldwin Sands,
yes,
and that motion passes.
thank you very much. Next item is matters arising from the minutes.
So the next item on that list would be watershed conditions report, and I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a lot to report this month. We did get very little rain in May, about 28% of normal, which is quite low. But we did get quite a bit of rain at the end of the month, which helped out with that. Great Lakes in general are lower than normal. We're definitely tracking last year. But that's a seasonal decline, so that's normal. And then we're also able to help with some species at risk with the upper towns with collecting turtle eggs that are in danger of being crushed or destroyed in areas where they tend to lay their eggs, and some new places, fire pits, roadsides, in the parks. So we're able to help the species out by taking those eggs to the upper towns so they can incubate them and then some later on.
Thank you. Next item.
Yes, Cape Criminals.
Thank you. Just wanted to bring this board up to speed on our swimming pool operations at our campgrounds. There's been a few changes resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. So our pool facilities right now at both parks are classified as B pool under the Public Pools Act. So what that means is we're exempt from having supervision. So lifeguards are not required under a Class B pool. And we have so with that, we don't have to have lifeguards. It does require children under the age of 12 to be accompanied by an adult. And there are capacity issues that are constrained based on the surface water area of each pool. We do have a wading pool at Dalewood that is classified C that requires not necessarily a lifeguard, but supervision. So under our minimum requirements under the Public Pools Act, we're not required to have guards, but we do require the supervision attendant at the wading pool. If I could have the next slide, please. Regardless of that classification, pre-COVID, we always took the position of having lifeguards at our pool for public safety, liability. When we have lifeguards at our pool, there are requirements under a Class A that we have to follow regarding lifeguards on duty. Throughout the pandemic, we did run into issues that were consistent across the region. There was a lifeguard shortage, whether it was a result of lack of training abilities or students wanting to go forward with completing that NLS certification. So it was not uncommon. It was very hard and difficult to find lifeguards over the pandemic. In 2020, because of the COVID-19, we did not operate our swimming pools. They remained closed. In 2021, we did open them, but that was the first time we experienced we weren't able to retain lifeguards. So through consultation with the health unit, we did operate our pools that year as Class B. So we did not have lifeguards. Because of that water surface area, that limits our capacity to only 10 bathers in the pool at a time. So although we can run without lifeguards, it creates a big constraint with the amount of people in our parks and only allowing 10 at a time. And although we didn't have lifeguards, we did have the pool's staff. So there was a staff there. They weren't there to lifeguard, but they were there to enforce the rules, enforce the capacity, make sure safety is being met. They maintained the pool, did the water quality testing, all of that. In 2022, we developed a plan that we would do a hybrid depending on the availability of lifeguards. Our goal was to hire lifeguards, but if we didn't find any, we would operate them unguarded, similar to what we did throughout the pandemic. One positive news that we realized through prior consultations with the health unit is because the Dalewood wading pool is a Class C pool, it doesn't factor into the water surface area as the main pool. So we were allowed to have more bathers in the Dalewood pool without a lifeguard. So that year although we searched for lifeguards, we were unsuccessful. We had to, again, run our pools unguarded, which means 10 people at the Lake Whitaker pool, but we could increase our capacity at Dalewood, which we kept to 30 people with a guard, or with an attendant. So we can have more capacity at Dalewood. So moving into this year, there still are some limitations with retaining lifeguards. We went on a full campaign to try and retain lifeguards for both our pools. We increased our wages for consideration to make it more attractable to us. We advertised flexible hours, we work with you in other jobs, we increased the rate. We still weren't very successful in retaining lifeguards. Up until last week, we only had one hired. Happy to report we hired a second one last week after this package went out. So we do have 2 lifeguards now, which we are focusing on having them at Lake Whitaker so that we can increase the bather capacity for our users. It gives us the ability to run at least an 8-hour shift every day of the week with a lifeguard. We still do plan to, at times, if a lifeguard is unavailable, calls in sick, we do have other staff trained that we can then operate as our Class B pool again. So Moving forward, what we're planning on doing this year, we do not have lifeguards at Dalewood, so we intend to operate it unguarded, but we do have a crew member present, again, to enforce the rules, provide that supervision that's required for the Class C pool. Under the health unit, that attendant or supervisor just has to be a minimum of 15 years of age, hold a current first aid CPR certificate, and trained in pool operations and emergency response. So we plan to operate Dalewood unguarded with attendants that meet that requirement. And thankfully, because we were successful in retaining 2 lifeguards, for our next slide for Lake Whitaker, we intend to run it with lifeguards. So we follow the Class A requirements, which allows 30 bathers per lifeguard on duty. But we do intend that if we do get into struggles where a lifeguard is not available that day, we can run it with an attendant. We just have to post the required signage and reduce the bather capacity to 10. So although it's not the preferred approach, our goal is to always have both pools guarded. We just ran into another situation where we weren't successful in getting enough lifeguards to run both pools as a guarded pool facility. So we are meeting the minimum requirements of the regulation. The health units have already inspected our pools, gave us clearance to open under these. And it's our intention to have our pools opened. I believe we're going to do an early opening on Wednesday or Thursday, but full operation coming July 1st long weekend. So it is a little different. We're still dealing with some of the challenges with retaining lifeguards, but wanted to make sure the board was fully up to speed on how we intend to operate our swimming pools this year.
Thank you, Joe. Comments from the committee? Councilor Hibbert.
When someone gets in trouble, the lifeguard has to dive in. How does the lifeguard get assistance? Is there an emergency button they can push before they dive?
Yeah, so if we have a lifeguard on duty, they're trained in national life saving, so they will react.
Yes.
Under the health unit, there are emergency requirements that we have. So on the outside of our pool building, we do have an emergency stop button that stops the equipment operations and sounds an alarm.
That'd be important.
Right, and then we, of course, we do have emergency response protocol, where we have 2-way radios to call over for assistance, emergency landline telephones there for 911 calling. So yeah, we have all of the full emergency response requirements in place.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Thank you. Seeing none.
The next matter is arising report is the July 1st CA Act progress report. So we do have to do these progress reports quarterly. As it's included in another agenda item, we've been working diligently on the draft cost apportioning agreements with our neighboring CAs and with shared municipalities. On April 24th, that draft apportioning agreement was circulated to senior staff from member municipalities to review and comment. And it's been reviewed by our KCCA as well, and we have another report on the agenda with the details of that. But this is just informing you that we're forwarding that progress report to the minister as per our requirements under the regulation.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor?
To the chair, Elizabeth, the progress report, you say it's quarterly. Is that mandated by our board or is that mandated by the province? You have to do it.
Yeah, that's mandated by the province.
So that's a lot of work. But a lot of information too, so.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for your comments. Anything further from the members? Seeing none, we have a recommendation that the matters arising. Go ahead, Lisa.
A3 be received.
Moved by Todd. Councilor Bill, seconded by Chair. Roll call, please.
Herbert,
That's,
McMillan,
you've got it first.
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Trousseau, Sam,
Muted.
Sam, you're muted. Wilson,
Yes.
Casa,
thanks, Sam.
yeah,
Alderman Sands,
yes,
and that motion passes.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is correspondence. So we did receive, London did receive a response back to their request to the province to have an exception to the appointing councillors to the KCCA board. They did ask for an exception to the 70% rule and wanted to appoint Sam as their councillor and 2 public appointees. The province has come back and said, no, they don't accept that request for an exception, and have instructed the City of London to ensure that 2 additional councillors be named to the Kettle Creek Board. Last night at the Strategic Priorities Committee meeting, Councillor Pribble was nominated to be appointed to the KCCA board, as well as Councillor Mirbeacon. I need to work. Van Meerbregen. I need to work on my pronunciation of that. Those 2 appointees do have to be ratified by council next week. But it looks as if we will have 2 new members joining the board. And I don't know, Madam Chair, if Sam has anything to add to that piece of correspondence. You're on mute, Sam, if you wanted to add anything to that piece of correspondence. See anything. So the other piece of correspondence that I did want to highlight was that Dalewood staff did post the St. Thomas Elgin Health Recruitment Partnership. This is a great committee that works at advocating for first-year medical students, really to showcase what the local region has to offer, in hopes that we can attract them once they become full-fledged doctors to join our community and work here. So it was a great opportunity to show what Dalewood has to offer and network with these young potential doctors and hopefully attract them to the region. We did receive a very nice thank you and acknowledgement from the recruitment committee that was included in the advance package. At Dalewood, we hosted them for some s'mores. Some of them have never had a campfire or enjoyed s'mores before. They certainly enjoyed getting out on the reservoir in canoes and kayaks. I think that was maybe a highlight of their visit here. It was a great evening.
Thank you. Any comments from members? Go ahead, Jim.
Was the letter from them was quite glowing. It's good to see. Hopefully it works.
Yes.
Well, I have the great distinction of being the chair of that committee. And Grant is also on the committee. So we have 2 representatives from KCCA. And I will say, this is the first time I've ever received, and I would like to circulate the thank you letter that was received. And they highlighted, because in their second year for medical school, that's one of the things that they do cover is healthy, active, sustainable community initiatives. And being able to have Dalewood right in the middle of the city of St. Thomas, plus Lake Whitaker, and the opportunities that were presented there. Elizabeth, one of the students you said came back. Would you like to tell the members?
Yeah, so we did offer the students that night, we offered them a free day pass to Lake Whitaker, as well as a free canoe and kayak rental. And one of the students came back, I think it was within 2 days, and cashed in their coupon to enjoy it again. So
that tells you the level of excitement. And if I could, we were even thoughtful enough. There are members of the medical community as students who have special dietary needs, and we accommodated those needs for their dinner and for the s'mores afterwards. And they were so appreciative. So with your permission, I would like to circulate the Discovery Week, and so you can see we have never received a thank you notice from any of them, and they said that their visit to Dalewood was the highlight, right as a thank you. So I'll circulate that around. Thank you for that, Elizabeth.
so the recommendation would be that the correspondence be received.
Mover, please. John. Thank you.
Herbert,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Trousseau, Sam, Sam, we're taking a vote. If you can unmute yourself. Wilson,
Yes.
Baldwin Sands.
Yes.
Marianne, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just reach out to Sam and ask him to unmute.
Okay,
For
one-
us?
I can do that.
so that we can. Okay, that motion passes.
Thank you. We will move on to our next item. Project review. Who is taking this?
Betsy is leading this one.
Thank you, Betsy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I have another project for your consideration today through the Kettle Creek Clean Water Initiative. This is a City of London project. It's restoration of a riparian area along the water course. And as you can see in that picture, it's a low area of the field along the water course that sits seasonally wet. So the proposal here is that the project will involve the creation of 2 wetland cells with a native buffer around it. The total estimated project cost is $13,993. And so the grant request from the Kettle Creek Clean Water Initiative would be $3,000. And this project is also receiving funding from SNCS. So if board members are in agreement today, then we would be looking for a motion to support 2303 in the amount of $3,000 through the Kettle Creek Clean Water Initiative. And I'm getting some questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee?
So what's the major benefit of doing this?
A lot of benefits in this scenario. Basically, it's going to help slow the runoff coming from the hillside of the farm before that water makes it to the water.
I have to go. Okay, goodbye.
So it helps to trap out some of the runoff and sediment before it gets to our water courses. But also within the watershed, wetland cover is very low. So it's also providing really important habitat.
And second, you have the budget for that?
Yes, we still have funds within the Kettle Creek Water Initiative for this year to support this.
Where exactly is it located?
On Manning Drive in the city, like rural portion of the city.
And that's some very nice bird watching areas. So I'm very, very pleased to see that. Any further comments or questions from the committee?
I'll move it.
Thank you. Sam, would you like to second it?
Second it. I'll second it.
Thank you.
On the vote, Jim Herbert,
Yes.
Yes.
McMillan, Noble, Trousseau,
Yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
and Baldwin Sands.
Yes,
And that motion passes.
thank you very much. Thank you, Betsy. Next item, please.
So the cost apportioning agreement, we brought the draft to you last month and you approved it for circulation to the member municipalities pending legal review. I just wanted to bring it back to you after that legal review, just to close the gap. There were very little minor changes that were made to the cases by the Casey solicitor and a last minute request from one of our municipal staff, but didn't change the substance of the agreement that we first presented to you. Betsy has worked on an accompanying guide to go with the cost apportioning agreement that just explains it in more detail and gives some background information to it. And then we also included the draft letter that we would propose to send out to your member municipal councils now. As you recall, the senior staff at your municipalities are supportive of it, had no real questions or changes to the draft that we put out, but this would be our formal now circulation to your member municipalities to look for support and get these agreements executed so that we can continue basically in the same manner that we have been. It's just getting our T's crossed and our I's dotted in the manner in which the province is asking us to do now. So the recommendation that I have for you today is that the final draft cost apportioning agreement and accompanying guide be circulated to member municipalities.
Thank you. Sharon, would you like to move that?
I'll move that.
Moved by Sharon, seconded by Trousseau. Herbert.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Could I get a clarification on category 3 programs, how we're broken down? Because you say all category 3 programs, I'm not 100% convinced. I don't understand the category 3 programs.
Yeah, so if you look both in the apportioning agreement as well as the accompanying guide, the category 3 programs and services or anything that this board feels are warranted to continue and benefit the watershed as a whole, that we are continuing to look for municipal levy to support. So non-mandated, but this board feels that they are warranted for this watershed. So what we've classified as category 3 are things like our campgrounds, our tree planting, our environmental monitoring, our stewardship services. Over half of those programs and services we self-fund. The only 2 that we're looking for to be covered off in these apportionment agreements and continue to use municipal levy are those tree planting and a portion of the environmental monitoring that we do.
I saw further on, you have the category 1, 2, and 3s, but I wasn't totally convinced how you decide what is category 1 or 2. If Utah campgrounds is 3, wouldn't that be a funded one under category 1?
No, so the province sets out in legislation what they consider mandatory and non-mandatory. And we are only allowed to continue to apportion levy for those mandatory ones. We have to have an agreement in place to continue apportioning and agreements for the category 3 programs.
Thank you. Might be a simple question, but
No, it's a lot to get your head around for sure.
And it bears repeating, so I thank you for asking. Member Wilson, yeah.
No, I just noted, sorry.
Okay,
So, yeah, so for the recommendation, I do have it moved by McMillan, seconded by Trousseau. Herbert,
yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Trousseau. Sam, you're on mute.
Yes.
John Wilson
Yes.
and Baldwin Sands.
Yes,
And that passes.
thank you. We're ready for our next one, please.
So as you recall, last month, we did bring you a programs and services survey and we circulated that out from May 18th to June 9th. Unfortunately, we did only get 22 respondents through this online survey, although we feel like we widely circulated it publicly and through local contacts and direct contacts with some of our user groups. But I will say that the respondents that we did receive were, I think, gave a good roughly a good representation of our different user groups. You can see on the graphs on the screen, the top right, our participants, 41% came from various user groups. So that's things like our seasonal campers, tree plant, people that have used us for tree planting or wetland creation. And the other 23%, the biggest user group, was just general public responding. In terms of where the respondents resided, it was nice to see that it was fairly evenly distributed, or we got responses from each of our member municipalities except for Middlesex Centre, with the majority coming from the municipality of Central Alpin. Most of the respondents have had a long relationship with Kettle Creek. So 45% of them had been involved, identified that they had been involved with the authority for 15 years or more, and the next was 10 to 15 years. So that's, these respondents had a long relationship with us. The one thing that I wanted to highlight and ties into the next report that we have for your consideration today is that we asked all respondents to rate their priorities for the next 5 years or the next 4 years. And so this was trying to get some public input into our budget planning process. And we did self-identify some areas that we thought they could rank, and they were asked to rank their top 3. Overwhelmingly, climate change and mitigating the effects of climate change seems to be top of mind for everyone. So all of those top 3 things can be kind of grouped under that category. Things are people are concerned and think a priority is wetland creation and restoration. Tree planting is top of mind. Mitigating the effects of climate change and acquisition of land protection were all the top things that people were interested in. Some other things I wanted to highlight is we asked the respondents to rank our programs, our current programs and services in terms of their satisfaction. And when we group those all together, 60% of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with our current offering of programs and services. And I have to say that when we asked them to identify why they weren't satisfied, it was never a case that there was a dissatisfaction with the level, our current service. It was more, they wanted more of it. Usually was what they identified. So improving or adding to those services. When we looked at what they were asking for more of, it was definitely increased communication. And that could be whether it was identifying a better website or more communication out to the public. Increased funding was often identified. Increased environmental services and enhancements to recreation were also identified. And just again, countering the effects of climate change with the on-the-ground stewardship efforts was top of mind, tree planting, wetland creation, and invasive species control. So this was basically just an attempt to gauge where the public is, how they see us, and help us inform and try to set our priorities as we look at our next 4-year budget. So the recommendation is just that the staff report on the programs and services survey results be received. And the only other thing that I would mention, probably on your way in, you might have met Rodolfo Sesteri. He's joining us as a co-op student from Fanshawe College, and he was instrumental in going through these survey results and coming up with the pie charts as well.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Well, I didn't ask another question, but I will to the chair. 22%, you couldn't have been excited with that. I mean,
Well, 22 respondents.
Is there a potential number that you thought you would have reached to really be beneficial?
I didn't have a number in mind, but yeah, we were disappointed in the number of
You
respondents.
made a lot of assumptions on 22 people.
Well,
Assuming that it's 22 separate people, could be husband, wife, giving their comments and but no, obviously you have to move forward and you get a lot of good comments from your staff, right? You know, so you gotta go somewhere, I agree, it's just that I thought maybe more would have been beneficial. Anyway, you're happy with it, that's fine. Maybe you're not happy with it.
I wouldn't say I'm happy with it, but we're analyzing the results that we did receive, and I think it's indicative that we can reach out to the public more and you know, make sure that we do more of this, and maybe the engagement will increase.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments? Then I will add one. I did post it on my social media, and I also use the ones that I'm involved with that are locally here. So Dalewood locks that are surrounding KCCA, the Dalewood area. And again, still the responses are low. So I agree with you that we need to do more communications, but the more we do it, the more people will start to become involved. We'll see the numbers increase. Yeah. Thank you very much. You do have a recommendation? Oh, sorry.
I'll lose that.
Thank you. Sharon, would you like a second? Thank you.
So on the motion, Herbert,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble,
Yes.
Trudeau,
yes,
Wilson,
Yes.
Baldwin Sands.
Yes,
And that motion passes.
thank you very much. We're ready for our next item.
So the next item is basically briefing you on where staff are in terms of the budget planning. As you recall, we do look at a 4-year budget, 2024 to 2027 as a planning horizon. The recommendation that I'd like you to consider today is that the 2024-2027 objectives and priorities staff report be accepted, and further that those objectives be approved and used to refine priorities and work plans for the draft budget moving forward. So just to go into the details, in the last planning horizon from 2018 to 2023, we looked at what our mandate is under the Conservation Authorities Act and arrived at 5 main objectives that we felt fit into that mandate. We're proposing only slight changes to those 5 objectives for the next planning cycle. And it's basically just trying to bring those objectives in with terminology that we're currently using, but also to bring into what's on top of everyone's mind in terms of changing climate, and as well as invasive species control as well. And you can see on the fourth item, increasing our outreach and engagement and education to the public as well. So the changes that we're proposing are highlighted in red. Focusing on those objectives, staff will begin to identify priorities for each objectives and then formulating budgets and work plans around those priorities. The goal is always to develop an achievable work plan with basically achievable work plans and a budget with an appropriate level of municipal levy, user fees, and self-generated revenue. So we're always trying to balance those revenue sources. I've done kind of a really early high-level look at the next 4 years, and obviously always looking at salary and uncontrollable cost increases first. And just, doing a blanket increase over the next 4 years. Early estimates are at least a 7% increase to deal with some of those inflationary costs. And that's very early on. That's not right sizing the budget. And by what I mean by right sizing, to get at 7%, I'm just putting a blanket percentage increase every year across the budget. But what we'll do in this next phase is I'll right size the budget. So I'll go in and look at those different line items, look at the actuals over the last 4 or 5 years and adjust that percentage to better meet what's actually happening on the landscape. But I think that early estimate of 7% should give the indication to the board of just the constraints that KCCA is under at this time to kind of control those keep those uncontrollable costs intact and balance all of our revenue sources to try to bring that 7% down. So as part of that process, what we've begun to do is I looked at, initiatives that maybe staff have talked about in the past, or, I know we only got 22 people responding in the survey, but there were some, I think things that backed what staff are feeling at the staff level as well, and just try to identify initiatives that might come up over the next 4 years that would have a large budget item to them that we might have to consider as we weigh all the pressures within the budget. And some of those things are listed on the screen in front of you, starting with legislative changes. We all know about it. There's mandatory changes that we need to have in place over the next 4 years that will require increased staff time and increased resources. Those are things like the land inventory, the conservation area strategy, the watershed resource management strategy. We have to have all those things done by the end of 2024, but they'll also cause us to have ongoing updates and increases that we'll have to do to those strategies moving forward that will take staff resources. We also know that Section 28, which is the regulation that Joe's department deals with, we know there are changes coming to that. So there's going to be policy development and changes that we're going to have to do, outreach to the community about those changes and possibly mapping changes. So an early budget number in terms of looking at those changes, I've estimated around $37,000. Updated floodplain mapping is going to be ongoing. We've been very lucky over the last couple of years in terms of securing funding to undertake some of our floodplain mapping updating. But this should be an ongoing thing that we are looking at and budgeting for moving forward. South Lake Whitaker, so there's about 20 acres of the southern portion of Lake Whitaker that's currently underdeveloped. We should be undertaking a management plan to look at how we can redevelop that area as a source of revenue moving forward. And while it will be a source of revenue that we are looking towards, there is an outlay of initial funds to get to that point. And we're estimating it like $80,000 is a one-time cost to get a management plan in place to determine what we can do with that portion of Lake Whitaker. Enhanced passive recreation. So this was identified numerous times within the survey and it's come up before. The Dalewood Reservoir Trail is probably our most popular trail. But it also has user conflicts that have been contained. But there's increased desire to have increased uses on that trail. And specifically, we maintain it as a hiking trail, but there's increased pressures to have mountain biking on that trail as well. And as staff, we feel that there's significant changes that would have to be made to that trail to support both user groups as well, just in trail development, but also in terms of staffing to monitor the users and to maintain the trail for both of those purposes. So we've tried to attempt to put a dollar value on that as well. Enhanced stewardship and invasive species. Increased service levels would have to be matched with funding availability. Community engagement is very closely tied to that first item of legislative changes, and we'll be trying as hard as we can to contain those costs, but look at how they can commingle with each other. And a final thing is wetland evaluation mapping. We know there's wetlands on the landscape that maybe haven't been identified, certainly haven't been mapped, and there's training that staff can undertake to better inform that process and get them mapped and identified. So those are just some early level things that staff have identified that have a significant dollar value to them that will have to be weighing in as we go through our budget process. And I've looped them into high areas of concern, so big priorities that we think we definitely need to look at within the next 4 years, and then medium priority, and then lower priorities. And so I'm bringing this to you today, not necessarily to make a decision, but more to inform you about the discussions that staff are having as we move through the summer and try to look at that 4-year budget and build a draft that we'll bring back to you at the end of summer and give you an idea of just kind of the budget pressures that we're on and the discussions that we'll be having over the next couple of months.
Questions or comments?
The sub-portion where in the past, it was just open fields. There's been enough sort of reforestation go on in there, probably wouldn't be too bad for campsites. That's sort of what you're moving towards.
Yeah, there was through your chair, there was a partnership, I guess, with an outside organization in which they were running kind of a camp for challenged children there, as well as cadets and veterans. And so that partnership ended a couple of years ago. And so there definitely is an area there that we could look at possibly expanding the campground or opening up other recreational revenue opportunities in that area. So that's what that management plan would look at.
So that's all I was thinking, the sort of the portion near the Maple Sugar Shack, but that you're talking about
we're talking about basically the corner of Avon Drive and like Whitaker Road.
Okay.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead, please.
Yeah, could you put back the slide that had the 3 levels of priorities? Was the enhanced passive recreation, is that in the second group or in the third group?
It was in the second group.
Okay, I would be very comfortable putting that in the third group. And I say that as an avid cyclist, because I think cyclists have to understand that there needs to be protected areas that are not available to cycling. I guess my question is, are there alternative routes that cyclists could use and enjoy the area and get to where they need to be going?
Yeah, I think I'll let Joe answer this. He looked like he wanted to say something.
That's fine. No, I was just gonna say, recently, a partnership with the city of St. Thomas has developed a mountain bike trail nearby. But I think the one constraint to your comment with that new mountain bike trail is it's an isolated location, not a connecting trail. So it doesn't offer cycling connectivity.
Yeah, in that case, I would be very comfortable even removing it from the list or moving it down to third, because that is going to create conflicts with other users. And the problem is the kind of cycle that is going to be used in these areas are likely to be those really thick mountain bikes. And I just think it's going to create conflicts. That's just my opinion.
Further discussion?
So we're just accepting the report today.
Yep.
Okay.
But certainly the comments like Sam, if you want to review that. Like the comments that are that's what we're looking for, feedback from the board members on some of those items. That's valuable feedback. And so if members have anything else they'd like to add after the meeting to staff on those priorities, we'll certainly feed that into the discussion at the staff level.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for those comments. And the only thing that I wanted to add is when I read that, I became excited about the community engagement piece, about bringing in volunteer groups and greater opportunities for networking. So enhancing volunteer groups, so for fundraising as well. Those are my comments, and you have a recommendation.
So the recommendation is up on the screen, just for accepting that staff report and further that those objectives be approved and used to refine priorities and work plans for the draft budget.
Thank you. Well, and Sharon? Yeah.
Herbert,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble.
Yes.
Rousseau,
Yes,
Wilson,
Yes.
Baldwin Sands,
Yes.
and that motion passes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item.
So the two policy updates that I have for consideration today are the right to disconnect and electronic monitoring. At your municipal level, you've probably already dealt with these items and policy developments. They came out of the Working for Workers Act, and they require employees with a minimum of 25 employees on January 1st of any year to have these in place. On January 1st of any year, we would not meet those requirements because we don't have our campgrounds open, we don't have our tree planting staff on. Just as a matter of transparency, accountability, especially for the electronic monitoring policy, I thought it was good that we would have these two policies in place. And it's always a good idea for staff to be reminded that they do have the right to disconnect from work. I think it's a good health benefit for staff to be cognizant of that right and to take actions to try to get a good life balance. So with those two things in mind, what I was suggesting is, while we're not required, that these are good policies to have in place. They're both building off templates that you would have had at member municipalities and neighboring CAs. And so the recommendation is that the right to disconnect policy and electronic monitoring policy be approved.
Questions or comments?
I think Sam has his hand up.
Stan? Thank you.
yes, just to say I really appreciate this and fully support this idea. It's just a good way to be treating all of our employees, and I don't think there's any cost to us from doing this. So great that you're doing this, and I approve. Yeah, I really support this.
Thank you, Sam. Any further comments from the members? Seeing none, should read the recommendation.
That the right to disconnect policy and electronic monitoring policy be approved.
John, do you want to move that?
I'll move it.
Seconder, Jim? Call the question?
Jim Herbert,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble,
Yeah.
Rousseau,
Yes,
Wilson,
Yes.
and Baldwin Sands.
Yes,
And that motion passes.
thank you very much. Our next item, please.
I can start this, Chair, and Jen can chime in if she has anything to add. The Dalewood Dam seasonal inspection, if you recall, we are now doing basically seasonal inspections, quarterly inspections of the Dalewood Dam, as we await to determine what our final decision will be in terms of maintenance on it. GD Valley completed this on June 8th. The dam spillway and wing walls are continuing to show signs of deterioration. While there are no changes shown on the north upstream, south upstream, and south downstream walls, there's continuing spalling of portions of the north downstream wing wall and areas of delamination on the downstream wing wall. So the downstream wing walls continue to show deterioration, but it was nice to see that there was no significant change on the actual spillway, which would be the major area that we would want to specifically monitor for any changes to in terms of doing any type of emergency repair on them. GD Valley will continue to monitor the dam seasonally, and as you recall, you passed a motion at a previous meeting to look at an options assessment. And it would be our hope that the option assessment is done hopefully by the end of the summer and brought back to the board as we start to look at the capital budget so that we can weigh this in. And I just included, they're in the advanced report, but we did have the engineer this time just to include some explanation in terms of the changes that he's seeing from the December 14th report to the June 8th report. So you can look at those in the pictures within the report. You can just see the area of spalling at the bottom left he's pointing to was identified in December, and then the change that he's seeing in the June 8th inspection. And this is the downstream, north downstream ring wall. And so he's just pointing to, it's really hard to see in these pictures, but if you look at this top edge is where he's seeing the change occur. So there's just a very little change further dip down, looking down on the wall where that concrete is continuing to deteriorate. And so today, all we're asking for is that the Dealwood Dam seasonal inspection report dated June 9th from GD Valley be received.
Thank you. Questions, Jim, do you want to move it or?
No, I'll move it, but I have a question for you.
Okay, go ahead, please.
This whole thing bothers me. We've been dealing with this since I've been on this board, Delaware, the dam. Why are we spending all this money, getting reports, getting updates, it's deteriorating slowly? Why don't we just fix it? Take a stand, get cost budget to fix it, and let's fix it. It's gonna be fixed one day. How much are you spending on getting these people doing reports quarterly or every other day or something? Just my opinion, it's gotta be fixed, let's do it. We should be done with all these reports. It's not gonna get any better. Need to fix it. So, I mean, we can accept the report, but what that report costs you? These guys don't come in for nothing, and the money could be easily spent getting someone in, this is what you have to do to fix it. And let's budget for it, let's move on with it, because it's gonna get done. Are we waiting for it to collapse on somebody down there and pull out 20 reports for the last 5 years that said, yes, we should be doing this? Anyway, just my opinion, I think we need to stop this, recognize it has to be fixed, and let's bring someone in, give us a couple quotes on what has to be done. Instead of keep getting all these things, look at all these pictures, well, it's getting worse. Just my opinion, my frustration, so thank you very much, it's just my opinion.
Further comments? Janet?
Elizabeth, how old is that dam?
It's 100 years old.
Has any remediation work been done on that in the past, say 10 years?
I'm sorry,
Go ahead, whoever, I'm not sure who would answer.
okay.
There's been remediation done on it throughout its history. So the deck was replaced, I think, in the late 80s. And the authority has done various tasks throughout to maintain it. You know, the history of what we have done so far is in past reports of the board. I think staff are just actioning the direction that was provided by past boards consideration. I think in terms of just ultimately fixing it, it's a huge cost to this authority to fix it. And that's where the past board decided to just place a pause button and make sure that that's the direction that we want to take, and that we are all aware of not only the cost to do the repair that we can visually see, but that we're prepared to do the repairs of the repairs that we can't visually see or that we may encounter as we try to fix this 100-year-old dam. So that dam assessment report is going to be looking at all those options, providing the costs, and then this board can decide how they want to move forward.
And if there is at some point a decision to fix it, then is it eligible for any other sort of outside funding, or does it have to come
So
solely
there,
from?
yeah, there is the water erosion control infrastructure fund that the province provides. There's 5 million in the pot every year, I believe now, but that's shared with all 36 CAs. At 50% funding. So we have applied for it in the past. And certainly repairs that we are considering to this or would be considered in the future would hopefully be eligible for that 50% funding, but our projects are weighted against other projects in the province.
So building a case.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim,
Todd stuck his hand up, I'll ask my question now.
certainly.
It's not serving the purpose it was originally built for, do we still need it?
So that's part of the options assessment that will give you. The original purpose of the dam was to create the reservoir for drinking water. It does currently hold some flood capacity control. But I think the bigger thing that the dam provides now is that it's created an environmentally significant area further up. And it would be, I think, a recreational But yeah, it would be a recreational change. If you got rid of it, what would happen is you'd probably lose that significant wetland further up, and the reservoir would become a stream. And so when you look at part of the options assessment, that will give you is that you can't just decide to take a dam out. There's a whole host of other studies that need to be done before you make that decision, including consulting with the public, doing environmental assessments, and things of that nature. So that's where we got to going towards the options assessment so that the board has a full idea of what each option would be, what are the steps to get to that option, and what are the costs associated to it.
Okay. Thank you. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. So we accept this report today, what are the next steps? What are your next steps? Are you gonna plan to replace it, or are we just gonna plan to plaster it up like we've done for the last 3 or 4 years and move on with it, or?
Chair, what I'm trying to be is a good dam manager. And to be a good dam manager is looking and making sure that this dam is not an imminent failure. I'm going off of the engineer's recommendation that we should continue to monitor this until the board makes a decision on ultimately what they want to do. And the past direction of the board is that we wanted that options assessment so that you guys can clearly look at what your options are, what the costs are associated with that, and then make a decision and move forward on it. That options assessment staff are gearing towards having, hopefully, basically, we've asked the engineer to have it by the end of the summer so that you have that options assessment. You can look at the costs of the different options, make a decision, we build it into the next 4-year budget, and we move forward with that decision.
That's what I would feel comfortable with, getting it fixed, replacing it, whatever has to be done, 50% funding. I mean, it's not gonna go away, and I can't imagine what you've spent in the last 3 or 4 years getting these engineers to give these reports and come with all this information. Must be a lot of money to do that, when you know down the road somewhere, either this board or the next board is gonna have to replace that. Anyway, just, I won't labor the point, I just would support. Done with all this stuff, get some reports in on fixing it, not patching it up for another 3 or 4 years and then fixing it.
And this board will be able to make that decision at the end of the summer.
Another laboring.
Thank you, and I also appreciated what I learned from Jennifer is the significant wetland that has been created upstream from all of the dam as well, with some endangered species having some habitat. And I appreciate what you said to the students, and it's something that I took from what that discussion was. So I thank you. That resonates completely with me. So we have a recommendation.
I'll move it.
Move it by Todd, seconded by John. Please.
Jim
So just
Herbert,
accept the report, that's all. Right?
To accept the report.
Yes, thank you.
McMillan.
Yeah.
Noble,
Yes.
Trousseau,
Yes,
Wilson,
Yes.
Baldwin Sands,
Yes,
and that motion passes.
thank you very much. On the next item, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking for our monthly receipt of our planning and permit activities for the staff report that was in the advanced packages. I would just highlight in this report, one specific permit is the municipality of Central Elgin is undertaking maintenance dredging of the Port Stanley Harbor. This is required to maintain flood capacity in Kettle Creek and to not increase flooding upstream. So there was a study done several years ago as part of the divestiture that recognizes the sediment loading in the harbor. Once it reaches a critical bed elevation, it does have an impact on flooding upstream. So the municipality is moving ahead with that. They have received approval from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Fisheries and Oceans that they'll be commencing this work as early as next week before the in-water timing restrictions are lifted. So they do place in-water timing restrictions for the protection of fish and fish habitat, but they felt they can mitigate that as part of this process. So they're starting early on that work, and it will be a full in-lake disposal of all the dredging material. So there will be a lot of activity and discussion around that topic in Port Stanley this summer. So I just thought I'd share that information in a little more detail. But we are just looking for receipt of the staff report.
Thank you. Are there any comments that you would like to make on this, Representative? Thank you.
Excuse me, Joe,
Yes.
through the chair, in lake, in other words, you take the materials out, the sediments, and then it's dumped.
And it's, it's
In-
disposed in the lake further out. And so they've strategically looked at locations, so it won't have impacts on the drinking water system. And as well, there is benefits from an ecosystems perspective of Lake Erie of maintaining those sediments, because the sediments that come down through the creek or erosion off our bluffs do drift through a literal cell and they deposit in known locations along. So there is some benefit of maintaining that sediment in the system.
That's good. Thank you very much for that information, and thank you for your question. Okay, we have a recommendation.
That the June planning and regulations activity report be received.
Moved by Todd, seconded by Jim. Further
Jim?
questions or comments?
Sorry,
Okay, please go ahead.
Herbert,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble.
Yes.
Trousseau,
Yes,
Wilson,
Yes.
Baldwin Sands.
Yes,
And that motion passes.
thank you very much, everyone. The next item, please.
The next item will be closed session.
Closed session.
If I can have a motion to go into close.
I saw them out.
Sharon? Motion to go into close.
Sure.
McMillan,
Yes.
Noble, Trousseau,
yes.
Wilson,
Yes.
Baldwin Sands.
Yes,
And that motion passes.
we'll now break for 2 or 3 minutes, just for closed session.
I'm just turning the live stream off now and stopping recording.